Silicon Valley: technology, art, green, and sustainability.
Welcome to another episode of Silicon Valley Tech, Art, Green, and Sustainability, SVTAGS. Today I'm very honored to have a wine grower with me, and it's John Schumacher. Am I pronouncing it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the vineyard has been around a very long time, Hallcrest, but that's not your last name. And I was like clicking going, oh, hey, is he related to my friend Doug Hall and, you know, some people, local people. So it's been around a very long time. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into how you came about to be a wine grower and vintner.
Certainly. I grew up in the Bay Area and on a small 2-acre farm. And my parents were both products of the Depression, so everything was waste not, want not. We were growing lots of plums and apples at the time. And
so you had one of those basements where they were saving the tinfoil and the glass and everything?
They weren't so much hoarders, they were very well organized, but all the fruit, all the fruits and vegetables, and we had these terraced vegetable gardens. We were growing everything. I mean, I just remember, pretty much between spring and fall, most of what we had on the table was pretty much what we grew besides.
That's awesome.
Got at a local store to supplement it. And so
what was the main thing they grew?
It all depended on the season.
So did they do apricots?
I ate a lot of plums and apples. That was
okay.
The apricots and certain type of stone fruit didn't do as well because they need riper circumstances. But the plums and apples did fantastic.
Okay.
So we were coastal kind of fog influence in the Bay Area, and so my mother was gone when I was about 13 years old. She was off on a trip. I was already into science. I was already into history. Learned a lot about winemaking from the Romans and Greeks. And
when you were 13?
Yes. So I'm going to give this a shot. And so I ended up making plum wine as a 13-year-old, and it turned out to be more like plum vinegar. And when my parents got back and they saw the results of this, they got me a home winemaking book. And then from there, it just took off. So each preceding year, I've utilized the fruit from the orchard, but also go up to a local home winemaking shop up in San Francisco to get supplies. So as a result, UC Davis was the only school I applied to because I wanted to become a winemaker, and that was the best school.
You wanted to get into farming, and they had the agriculture and
absolutely,
yeah.
And through various connections, I started to meet people that were beginning to start their vineyards up in the Napa and Sonoma valleys. So I kept in touch with a lot of those people. Was able to develop some connections and internships as a result of that. The plum wine, while I was studying at Davis, I ended up taking a distillation technology class, and I took all that plum wine and turned it into really good, high-quality plum brandy.
So off the get-go, you went into that. I thought you were an engineer originally, so for some reason.
No, I don't know.
Yeah.
What would give that impression? But no, that's always been my heart and dream. The interesting thing about it is when I went off to Davis, it was kind of a changing of the guard as far as the professors, and it was like there was kind of like old wood and new wood and a few people in between, and there were about a half dozen professors that were to me really on top of things and of the times. There are other professors that were coming in from other areas of specific study but didn't really know that much about winemaking, so that was kind of interesting. And then the older professors, most of the studies and the money that they were involved with had to do with research, more to do with the Central Valley, not the boutique wineries up along the coastal region. So it had more to do with gross production, mass scale production, and profit. So a lot of that efficiency had a tendency to do with the fact that if there was a problem out in the vineyard, you add ABC chemical or pesticide or herbicide. And if there's a problem in the winery, you add ABC preservative or chemical. And I thought, no, this is actually the world's oldest profession. I mean, it really is if you think about it, because it goes wine, women, and song.
Yeah.
And so wine is...
the Catholic Church wouldn't be allowed to have their services without the wine back in the day, right?
Well, and I could actually go off on this huge theoretical, religious, spiritual tangent upon that. But it is amazing that we have this beverage that nature actually makes for us due to the work that the yeast do, and it's the only alcoholic beverage that does not need the synthesis of man. So in fact, that's why I call myself a wine shepherd, not really a winemaker, because I'm not making the wine. nature is.
Nature
And
is.
so I'm just guiding the process.
So going back to your history, when you finished at UC Davis, did you work for somebody else, or did you?
Well, so I did do a couple of internships, one up in Napa at Cake Bread Cellars, and then one down at Felton Empire,
Did you
which
say
is the winery.
Cake bread?
Cake bread, yeah.
I love cake bread.
Yeah,
No wonder I like your
make
wine.
fantastic wines.
It's probably
And they
you
were-
that made the stuff I used to like there.
And I commuted on a daily basis actually from Davis to the winery, and that was my first real professional winemaking experience.
And that was only a
besides
few
all
years
the
ago, right?
Home winemaking, yeah, just a
few years.
pinch in time. And but at Davis, one of the things I was learning is that I was kind of dismayed by all the solutions they had, whereas I thought I was going to learn more of kind of like the true course of the path of winemaking, whereas everything seemed to be problem solving related in reference to using kind of like the modern industrial, at that time, the modern industrial age. And when I got out of Davis, one of the professors I was buying grapes from, we started our winery in our garage in Davis, and I think it was the youngest bonded winemaker in California, or winery owner in California at 24. And so I was getting grapes from a guy named George Nyland. He was the head of the pomology department, but he was since retired. Lovely guy. He was in his 70s, absolutely just strong as a buck. He'd helped me do lug 40 to 60 pound grape boxes when we were crushing and whatnot. But he was really big on the pesticide herbicide thing as far as problem solving in his vineyard.
Yeah.
Whereas down the road, about 4 or 5 miles outside of Davis, I was also sourcing grapes from an organic vineyard. And the organic vineyard is when there's no synthetic pesticides, herbicides, or mildicides used in the process. And when I'd go into that vineyard, I'd be taking samples, I'd be walking into spider webs, and yeah, there'd be some weeds on the ground, but the vineyard is full of life. You could see it teeming with life, but it was all in balance, and the grapes tasted incredible. The yields weren't as high, but they had more concentration of flavor, if you understand what I mean.
Oh,
What we
yeah,
call
yeah.
kind of like a lower crop ratio, or what we call now what's in balance and in moderation. Which I'd go into George's vineyard, and sometimes I couldn't even take grape samples because he had to have warning signs up after he sprayed. And you could smell this sickly chemical smell off the vineyard. And for me, I'm going, God, I think it's unethical for farm workers or anybody having to go in the vineyard. I didn't want to go in the vineyard and have that residual pesticides.
I'm going to pull up the first slide right now, as we haven't pulled up any slides really quick. And so here's actually up in the mountains. And what did you say the cat's name is?
That's Pinot.
Pinot.
Yes.
And is that a Pinot that Pinot?
We get more likes for Pinot than anything else on our Facebook site.
So that's actually not a Pinot next to Pinot then.
That's a Chardonnay next to Pinot.
That's a Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And then some
but
grapes.
it's called Pinot, technically Pinot Chardonnay, so it's.
And some grapes from your vineyard that somebody had blogged about. We can pull that down, and it's up in Felton.
Yes,
And
which
so
is
it's
just
beautiful.
6 miles north of Santa Cruz as the crow flies.
And your tasting room's there in
Yes.
Felton. And
Yeah.
do you have other tasting rooms too?
No, we don't. Most wineries cannot for a second license to have a tasting room someplace else.
Okay.
We haven't really found that perfect site. Plus, it would involve a lot of management. So, my wife and I really like keeping it small and intimate.
And you're open how many days for the tasting room?
Normally, it's about 7 days a week.
Okay.
Right now, we're kind of getting into the winter hours, so it's like
A little bit less.
Thursday to Monday from noon to 5.
Let's pull up one other slide really quick too. I had two at the beginning we were supposed to look at. And
but
so
I do want to
here-
finish telling my George Nyland
So
story.
tell us about this really quick. So
So
1949.
that is an historic label of the original Hallcrest bottle. So
And so what's at the bottom there? They look like coins.
those are medals.
Those are medals.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that's
one of them was a
original?
gold medal from the Los Angeles County Fair. It's one of our first medals that we won for an organically grown wine I named after my daughter back in 1988.
So to finish the story.
So
and we
that
pull
was
that
that
down.
was that was basically the kind of the coming of organic moment for us in sustainable viticulture. Was that when I was sitting here talking to George, he'd sit there and tell me, he goes, "Yeah, I just sprayed for leafhopper," and I go, "George, you spray for leafhopper, but you got all this more leafhopper in your vineyard than the guy down the road who doesn't spray for leafhopper at all." And what I realized is that in the vineyard that's balanced, there are predatory insects going after the insects you don't want, whereas in the vineyard that you're constantly doing the sprays, you're sitting here attacking these things with chemicals. One thing pops up, you attack it with a chemical. Another thing pops up, you attack it with a chemical. Plus, I didn't want to be in that vineyard. My whole thing about working with both in the vineyards and in winemaking was being in nature, in a natural process, and not having to worry about this industrial age of the
Right,
byproducts.
which isn't good
of,
for you. It's not good for the animals around. It's not good for the
it's
water
not for you.
content.
Good for your kids that run around
Right.
the winery and vineyard. And
Yeah.
that's why we got our
Or the
place
pets
certified.
or- yeah.
Yeah, it's I didn't want to have to worry about it. And that will lead to another story that
Well,
has
so
come full
again,
circle.
going back, how did you become owner of, because this was 1949, right? And it wasn't a family thing. So,
So in 41 is when Chaffee Hall, he was a San Francisco maritime attorney. His family had owned land back at the turn of the last century,
1890s or something,
1890s
yeah.
to 1900. And so he was a huge wine lover and collector. He was a member of the Bohemia Club. And he'd come down in the summers and work the property, and finally decided to plant a vineyard. And one of the things that we got when we purchased the winery was his label collection from the 20s, 30s, and 40s
Wow.
of wines from around the world. And the great thing about Chaffee, he was not a Francophile, as we'd say. I mean, he not only loved wines from France, but he loved wines from Germany and Italy. What he decided to plant in the vineyard originally, what was apropos for cold climate viticulture, was Cabernet Sauvignon and Johannesburg Riesling, which we now refer to as white Riesling. So there's no confusion with Riesling that would come from
With
Johannesburg.
Johannesburg, yeah.
So those grapes loved the cool evenings. The Cabernet actually was very Bordeaux-like, lower
Hot days,
alcohol.
cool evenings.
Yes,
Yeah.
and honestly, I mean, really, the Cabernet only had ripened to fruition, maybe 1 and 3 vintages, 1 and 2 vintages. So there were plus and minus vintages. The 1949 vintage that we depicted in the picture was an excellent vintage. That was just an incredible vintage. And I have people that come by asking for some of our library wines, which we did collect some of the old Chaffee Hall Hallcrest wines from that. So Hallcrest was actually a place that I internshiped at while I was at UC Davis, but at the time it was called
And
Felton
again, that was
Empire.
only a few years ago. No.
Yes.
How long ago was
So
that?
that was 1981.
81, okay.
And when I internshiped there, I learned from 3 different winemakers. Was Brooks Reed, Steve Storrs, and they were the white and red winemakers. And they were those two in particular have now gone off and done their own ventures. Steve has his own winery,
Storrs Wine, yeah.
in Santa Cruz, and then Brooks is really jumped up in the world. He's managing one of the largest, most prestigious wineries up in the Napa Sonoma area. So I had internship there, fell in love with the Santa Cruz Mountains, the redwoods, the whole scene. There was a great music scene always coming through town. And I said, I really felt like I found home. So after my wife and I started our winery up in Davis, we found out the place was coming up for sale back in 1986, 87. And we sold everything.
So you had a winery in Davis first.
In the garage, yeah.
Okay.
And we sold everything there. And I was working for a couple of distributors up in Davis, didn't quit the day job. And we did our complete family move down to what was Felton Empire. And I met the Chaffee Hall's daughter and her husband, and they gave us the blessing of using the Hallcrest, reestablishing the Hallcrest name.
So you purchased it in the 80s or 90s?
Yeah, 86, 87.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we didn't even, we started to get into your history, but you have children. How many children do you have?
So we had 3 children.
And do they help with the winery?
They do under forced child labor circumstances. They've all grown up. My wife and I raised them to follow their own dreams, and they're all doing that right now.
So they're all
one's
out of school, out of college.
Special ed teacher. The other is a firefighter, paramedic, and the third is a traveling videographer.
And so are they local?
Yeah, it's locals. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all stone's throw away.
So interesting. Yeah. So I saw there was some video and some nice film on your site. So your son probably did that.
And then we had 3 nieces moving with us, and they also became part of the family, and they're all doing their own thing too.
So did your son do the website stuff? Because it was really good photography. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Austin.
Really,
he
it was
helped
beautiful.
us out with that.
So when people go to that, they'll see the vineyard and how beautiful it is. I'm going to pull up because I think it's already 15 minutes in. Let's pull up another slide. So it's kind of a sepia color, black and white of the vineyard.
Yeah, so that was about 1969, 71.
Okay. So this is an older one, and let's pull that back down.
It could have been even closer to maybe 80, 81 when I was working there. So it was from the far view looking down, and that vineyard unfortunately so it was about 75 years old by the time we got to the end of it, and we had to pull it up because it had Pierce's disease and Eutypa. The vineyard was originally established with no irrigation. And so I have video taken from 16 millimeter film of when Chaffee Hall was sitting here dragging a 200-gallon tank, watering each vine is to be established from a 200-gallon wooden tank.
You have a watering system.
And it was a draft horse dragging this thing through the vineyard on a sled, on a wooden sled. And as much as I appreciate the romance of that time, the time that he might have had, unfortunately, today we're gonna have to drill a well and establish.
So you do
the
have a
vineyard.
water system, then it's not a dry
We don't
farm?
we don't have that in yet, but it was dry farmed up until we pulled it out.
Okay, okay. And how many people work with you now there?
Just a handful of people. I mean, at one time we were up to 10 or 15 employees, and my wife and I decided to bring it back down a little bit because as you kind of get on in years, you want to, plus it gives us the time to launch other projects.
And I guess that's a good time to talk about, let's grab the end one here, the cider.
Yeah, the cider.
So this is something new for you guys, and this is,
Well,
what
we
is this
started
one?
this project in 2009. And we're the first cidery in Santa Cruz. There are a lot of orchards, apple orchards, that were certified organic. We wanted to keep our certified organic mantra, and we wanted to make hard cider without sulfites like we do with our organic wines.
And this one is, it's a hard cider. You also had a pomegranate.
Yeah, so
which I fell in love with your pomegranate cider, and which is one of the reasons I
we had that
invited
on
you.
tap at the Scotts Valley Art and Wine Festival. Yeah.
And then we've got some other things here. Let's look at this too. What is this?
So that is a red wine. It's called Carignan. It's Carignan is basically a blender that's used with grapes from the Rhone region. I loved this particular vineyard so much that we decided to make it a single varietal.
Can you get a close-up on that or no?
Many Carignans. So this is under our Hallcrest label. These are organically grown wines.
Okay.
And so the difference being is that we do add a little bit of sulfur dioxide as a preservative, which most wineries do in the industry. But my wife and I are very sulfite sensitive, so we use very low levels of sulfur dioxide.
And then we got another one here.
Yeah, this is our Organic Wineworks Radical Red.
Beautiful. That's
this
a beautiful
is pretty
label.
much the flagship of our Organic Wineworks brand. We make more Radical Red than any other organic wine, and it's very affordable.
And then the last one.
It was my objective to make something that people could afford to put on their table every night, because we had wine on our table when I was growing up.
Oh, this would be a good point to do this too. So this one here is.
This is a Primitivo. Primitivo is a cousin to Zinfandel, and they only found out its source of where it came from in the old Yugoslavia region.
And I think that would
Europe,
be a good point to hold this up, because is this what's on that label?
Well, it's a different design. This is basically Leonardo da Vinci inspired with his inventions.
Okay,
and it's basically kind of like a winemaking machine. It's supposed to be tongue-in-cheek to the concept of being organic.
So tell us about this.
So I got together with a designer in Santa Cruz when we wanted to do the Organic Wineworks label.
Okay.
And we came up with this design where the grapes go in one end, and kind of like Willy Wonka style or Rube Goldberg, grapes go in one end and kind of goes through this processing machine. The wine comes out at the other. So
kind of reminds me of an Escher too, or
we're supposed to be having fun with it. So.
Yeah.
And we've got the clock in there for the idea. I've got the Liberty Bell, because we should have the liberty to be able to make wine. It's upside down, being used as the fermentation vat.
Interesting.
And
I don't know
the
if they can
musical
get it.
instruments. So we have harmony in the wine. An old steam engine. My oldest brother was what we call a choo-choo. He's a train fanatic. So I kind of put that in there for his benefit. And
again, I want to stress the importance of what this is saying. It's the first certified organic winery. And let's put this down. So how did that come about?
So these guys are he pulled these from baseball, the label designer.
Okay.
These are old baseball players.
Baseball guys, okay.
But they're helping us make wine.
And again, the importance of what this is stressing is it's organic, and you're the first organic.
Yes, we're the first.
In California or Santa Cruz Mountains?
No, in the country.
In the country.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were, as a matter of fact, it was recognized by at the time it was called BATF, but it's TTP, and we were the first winery to be allowed to put organic on the label.
And what's the why is that so specifically? And it's not because you're not using the pesticides.
People talked up organic. They maybe talked about their wines being organic, but we actually incorporated it into the name. So by law, if you say something in your name, you have to abide by it. So someone says, "I've got a wild strawberry fruit drink." Those strawberries have to be they have to be wild. They can't be something you've cultivated.
So it's the truth in advertising. You have to say,
absolutely, yeah. And in a lot of industries, I see this kind of played on the edge. So we wanted to make sure that we were certified first by the state of California, and then what eventually became federal law. But the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms would not allow us to put organic on the label until they contacted the Department of Food and Drug. And they said, "Is this possible?" And the Department of Food and Drug told them it wasn't possible. So they kicked all our labels back. And I said, so I actually contacted Food and Drug, and the head of the Department of Food and Drug for the state of California contacted me, got my backstory. He came down here with his the head of his lab, toured our winery, saw what we were doing, and then basically wrote a letter to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, said we were the real deal.
That's
so
awesome.
That was really impressive, yeah.
So that's
because I didn't know anybody who could do this.
So the FDA approved for organic, which is pretty amazing. Let's bring up another photo right now too, because
the BATF is our regulatory agency, and the FDA.
So Santa Cruz Scrumpy. Tell us the.
So the term scrumpy comes from an old English term of scrumping for apples.
Okay.
And so basically the peasants in England didn't have their own orchards. So they would always have to go in after the gentry or the king and the queen, the earls that had the orchards, already harvested the best fruit. And so these were apples that would typically end up on the ground, and you couldn't make anything decent with them except for they made an alcoholic beverage. So when they were getting the apples, they were kind of illegally trespassing and stealing, but really it was fruit that was being forgotten. And it was called scrumping for apples. And so the resulting beverage is called scrumpy. There's about a dozen cideries here in the States that use the term scrumpy as opposed to hard cider. So it's a romantic term, but it means the same thing as hard cider.
Yeah. We're going to pull up another slide now. So this one here, so this is the Santa Cruz Scrumpy.
Yeah, that's a picture of our cider. And we believe that our cider should be served in a wine glass so you can pick up all the aromatic compounds.
Instead of a beer glass.
Well, because it's wine made from apples.
Okay.
So it has all these aromas that the glass, in a sense, accentuates and focuses onto your olfactory senses.
Lets it breathe a little bit, and yeah. Let's pull up another slide now. I'm not sure where we're at on the slides, but what is this one here?
So this is our port-style wine. It's called In Every Storm, because it's against the law to actually name your wine as a port in California.
Unless it's from Porta.
Unless, or if you're grandfathered in before the treaty went through. And the concept of the treaty is, and it's a great treaty because we wouldn't want people to call wines that are made in South Africa Napa. And so it honors the geographical designations that are already established by wine areas throughout the world. And so we had to kind of come up with clever names so people would realize it's a port-style wine. And that's why
port.
In Every Storm is the name of the wine.
My grandfather on my mother's side was Portuguese from the Azores. And I remember when my sister got engaged to her second husband, she's been married 3 times, my half-sister, my grandfather said, oh, we have to try this port. And we have like 5 minutes left. So you have to try this port. And he went down to the basement and he brought up this port, and his family were dairy farmers in the Central Valley, but he got in a different business here. And we all toasted, and as soon as he turned his head, we all spit it out because it had turned to vinegar, right? But good port is a great thing in our family. So I'm going to pull up another one really quick because I think we're behind and we only have 5 minutes left. Tell us about this right here. What's this?
So those are grapes in a half-ton picking bin. So when they come in, we harvest all the way from Mendocino and Lake County down to Madeira. That's where we source our grapes, both organic and some conventional. And all the apples we get from the Santa Cruz Mountain area, except for I do get some Gravenstein from the Petaluma Sebastopol area. And those bins, that size, about 1,000 pounds, and that's what they're picked into. Load them onto a truck, and they're shipped, and everything is processed at our facility.
In Felton?
Yes.
In Felton.
Yeah.
One more, let's do another slide. I think we have just a couple left now. And then this is something fun. What is that we're looking at there?
Well, it's a game that hipsters came up with called Cornhole. I hate the name, but it's basically a beanbag game. It's a drinking game.
It's a drinking
game. And everyone knows about it. If I got to explain it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So beer pong,
you've got to get out there more often.
The cornhole. And let's pull up another one
It's wonderful
really quick.
because you can hold a glass of wine or hard cider or beer in one hand and basically
and still do the cornhole thing. What is this one here?
That is a picture of our Chardonnay.
Okay.
That's made from the Santa Cruz Mountains area.
And then really quick, let's pull up the next one because we've only got a couple more minutes. This is our, what do you need from the community slide? What's your needs?
And unfortunately, we didn't get all the pages of the questions, but really, you were like asking, what is it that the community can do to help us, and what are we? And I've been, in a sense, besides promoting organic grapes and organic apples, and now that organic's gone more mainstream, and we've got national grocery store chains that's been bought by the world's biggest corporation that has been emphasized on organic. I mean, all that is great. And for us, we're kind of getting into some other projects, and one of them is the butts out type of project. So I see cigarette butts all over, various communities,
Okay.
and it drives me
I
nuts.
thought you were like butts out of the jeans.
Butts
so
out.
cigarette butts. Okay.
So I finally found a cigarette butt receptacle that was pretty reasonably priced, and they're in all the Caltrans rest stops. And I contacted this guy, Ken Beckstead, and it's a butts only box, and we're going to start putting them in throughout the San Lorenzo Valley and in Santa Cruz.
help stop
So I'm
polluting the
taking
area.
proceeds from some of the fundraising that we're doing to go to the butts only box.
Okay,
So-
and then so
and I'll
since we
stop
only have-
yelling at people for throwing their cigarette butts.
Definitely,
and,
it's horrible, right, to
just-
see that on the beach
well, it's
or whatever.
Plastic, it's plastic in the oceans, and the tobacco is toxic to fish. And I feel sorry for people who smoke. I know
Well,
it's
and
one of the most
dogs
addictive
sniff it up and
things
eat it
we've got.
sometimes. And
Yeah, but if they just walk, just a few feet one way or the other, we're going to put cigarette butt receptacles to put them out. And
so really quickly, events at your location too. We have 2 minutes left. So you do
oh, okay.
a lot,
Well,
you
we
do
have
a lot of
our
events.
we have our 30th anniversary coming up.
Wow.
When we bought the winery, but
Okay.
I'm waiting till the wine is made ready to release. So
Okay.
it gives us a little more, and it's the 75th anniversary of when the vineyard was originally established.
Wow, that's pretty special.
Also, so there's two things. We're the longest owner winemakers of that historic facility. There was, two others before was Chaffee Hall, and he did it for 20 years, and then Felton Empire, and they were there for about 10 or 12, and then for 10 years the grapes were sold to other facilities.
So Mother's Day, Father's Day, Valentine's Day, it seems like you do stuff on all the holidays.
Yeah, and any excuse to have a party.
Okay.
So.
And then do you do a stomping party or not really?
No, we
Or-
did way in the past.
Okay.
But
And what about
things happen. Someone gets a grape seed in between their toes, and it's just.
what about harvest, like harvest time?
So we do, and we can't schedule this because when you harvest the grapes really is determined upon the vineyard and not when you put a party date up.
Okay.
So what we do, I call up several of our neighbors and our best friends and say, hey, the grapes are coming in a day or two, come and join us. And we get a different priest or religious leader from a different church or spiritual
bless.
organization, and they come and do the blessing of the grapes. And it's
Okay,
always
and I'm supposed to
someone different.
close,
It's nice.
but really quickly, do you encourage people to bring food up, or do you have food on
Oh,
site?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then give me the close. So
we
I'm
got
just
we
going
got
to
a
say
great organic market called Wild Roots. It used to be New Leaf. But
it's just beautiful up there. So
And the deli, you order a sandwich, and really two people can be well fed from one
okay, I'm
sandwich.
getting the wrap up. So thank you so much. They can follow you on Facebook. Go to your website. Do you also have Instagram or anything like that?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So they can check it all out on your
Hallcrest
website.
Vineyards and Santa Cruz Scrumpy on Instagram.
And thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the audience
thank you,
for
Heather, for
watching
having
us.
me.
Also, follow us on Twitter, SVTAGS, Instagram, which I got to get better at. And then also, really quickly, our next guest will be coming from Mexico. She worked for the UN and wrote this book. This will be our next guest in September. So tune in for that. And follow us again on Facebook, Twitter. Make this a great Tags Week by conserving, reusing, and rethinking the way that you choose to live here in Silicon Valley and beyond. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.